So we're going to be looking at the last two of the 5 movies that came out last weekend. One of them is about a guy that was accused of a horrible crime in high school that he did not commit, by the way, and he lost about a decade or so of his life, plus his shot at playing in the NFL, and also a movie about a dog dying. Was Hollywood trying to make us cry this weekend? Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin Movies double feature. As always, I'm your host, the real Geno Reynolds, and today, as I said before, we're going to be talking about the last two of the 5 movies that came out last weekend. We're going to be talking about Brian Banks and The Art of Racing in the Rain. And first, I have to say this. If I mess up the title of the latter, don't be surprised because I have to look at it every time I say it because it is a ridiculously long title and just hard to remember. And also, I probably will be spoiling these movies. That being said, one of them's based on a true story. If you know the story, well, you kind of know what's going to happen. And the other one was produced by the same people that produced Marley and Me. So I think you kind of know what was going to happen anyway, even though I kind of spoiled it in the intro. That being said, again, you learn this at the very first of the movie. But anyway, we'll get to The Art of Racing in the Rain in a minute. First, we're going to be talking about Brian Banks. It's about this kid in high school who he's trying to get his life back. He's on probation. He spent 6 years in prison. He was charged as an adult for raping somebody, even though he did not do it. The girl lied, basically, and a lot of it seems to be because of her mother. And it's about him trying to get the California Innocence Project to take a look at his case and help him get his life back so he can try to fulfill his dreams of playing in the NFL. And we also learn about the past and everything and what all happened and all that. This movie, I enjoyed it. I did. It's definitely a feel-good movie. So if you need a feel-good movie, well, this one will do it for you. You know how it's going to end. Even if you don't know the story behind it, which honestly I did not going into it, you will get something out of it when it comes to the positivity of the movie. I know critics are just dumping all over this one for being very by the numbers, and it is. It's very by the numbers, and parts of it are a bit ridiculous. That being said, I give a lot of credit to this movie because, at least from what I can find, and I've been studying history versus Hollywood and other things behind the story, they stick to a lot of what really happened. Now, they do make some changes, and I will talk about those, especially when it comes to the ending. Sort of the true ending gets changed. Not a lot. When it comes to just the movie as an overall movie, even though I liked it as a whole, I probably would never watch it again. Because this movie honestly felt like it's basically a made for TV movie on the big screen. I mean, not saying it doesn't. I mean, it's got some big stars in it. Not knowing going in this anything about it, I had seen the poster and I knew that Aldous Hodge was playing Brian Banks. I knew Greg Kinnear was in it. I knew Sherry Shepherd was in it. That was it. So you're watching it, and the movie's going along, and it's fine. And then they start to talk about when Brian Banks was in juvie, and all of a sudden, his teacher's Morgan Freeman. And I'm like, whoa, it's Morgan Freeman. That's probably one of the main reasons I think why this made it to the big screen. He's not in it a ton, but he plays this mentor of Brian Banks, and he's basically, if Morgan Freeman gives you advice, you're probably going to listen just because of that voice. But yeah, so I think that might be one of the main reasons it made it to the big screen. Again, it's not a bad movie. It's just, I don't know. It just felt like it was a made-for-TV movie, at least somewhat quality-wise. The acting's fine. There's no real standout performances or anything, but the story itself is what carries it. Even though I enjoyed the story as a whole, half of it feels like a PSA for the Innocence Project, and I'm not saying that they're bad or anything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this almost just felt like it was a commercial for it. I mean, I totally believe in people trying to help people that are innocent get their lives back. I'm all for the real thing. But just when this movie kind of starts to feel like a commercial every now and then for it, it just kind of takes you out of it just a little bit. And I know that's who he went through and all that, so of course they're going to be in there. But it just kind of, at times, it felt a little heavy-handed on the advertisement of this thing. That being said, they are a part of the story, so they're going to be there. When it comes to stories based on true stories, and again, I didn't know much about this, but there was a couple of things that they changed, that they only changed it to make someone look a little better, even though you'd understand that this person made another decision. The big thing was the girl that accused Brian Banks recanted her testimony later in life. She even tried to contact him on Facebook, and that was part of the movie, and I'm like, this is kind of silly, but it was true. It happened. She tried to contact him on Facebook years after she ruined his life. But there's this part where at the end of the movie, they ask him, is he going to go after her? Why is he going to try to get payback, basically? And he basically is the bigger man, says, I just want my life back. I just want to move on, all this stuff. Try the bigger man, right? That being said, and I have a quote here. The question was, why didn't Brian Banks press charges against Juanetta Gibson for false accusation? By the way, they changed the name of the girl that accused him. He said, quote, the statute of limitations was expired for perjury, Banks told the Griot, who was interviewing him. I would have absolutely pressed charges against her if I could. Part of my life was taken away because of her. But more importantly, you have to go after people like this because a person such as herself makes it harder for a woman who is raped to come forward confidently and share their story and hope something is done about what happened to them. They should be able to expect. They should be able to expect to be believed. I think that would have been a stronger message. I think they changed it to make it look like he's the bigger man, but I think him going after her for ruining like a decade or so of his life for the reason he wanted to go after her in real life was to give people that this had really happened to more of a chance to be believed. I think that's a smarter story. It's a more relevant story, especially nowadays. So I didn't like that they changed that. But the rest of the movie, most of it seems to be pretty spot on with what happened. The only other big thing they changed, technically, was that they gave him a specific love interest. And the reason they did it was because they wanted to show Brian Banks had to explain to everyone he was with, everyone he dated, that he was a convicted sex offender, and even though he'd done nothing wrong. So he had to explain that to all the girls he dated and everything. And I think they just created this one person because they didn't want to have to deal with using different people, that he dated different people and stuff like that. They just wanted to kind of make it an amalgamation of all these people into one person. I always wondered about that character because whenever near the end of the movie they show the mom and they show Greg Kinnear's character together watching Brian Banks play football. The girlfriend wasn't there, and I'm like, I wonder if she wasn't real. And sure enough, she's not. Again, though, I kind of understand why they did it. It bothers me a little bit, but not enough to where it ruins the story. So, again, is this movie worth checking out in theaters? Audiences are loving it. Yeah, if you need a feel-good movie, it's a decent feel-good movie. Though it's based on a true story, it feels just like any other kind of righting a wrong type of movie. There's nothing real special about it, but if you need a feel-good movie, it'd be worth checking out. I would say it's a rental at best. The next movie we're going to talk about is The Art of Racing in the Rain, and what this movie is about, it's about a dog named Enzo, named for Enzo Ferrari, and we can hear Enzo's inner thoughts, and those inner thoughts are Kevin Costner, who basically narrates the entire movie. It's also about an aspiring racer played by Milo Ventimiglia, and it's their life together and what happens all throughout the life of the dog, basically. Being that this movie was produced by the same people that produced Marley and Me, when I saw that on the trailer, I said, that dog's going to die, isn't it? And of course, Marley and Me hit me pretty hard back then. This one, though, I'm not going to say it didn't give me some feels, because it is one of those movies. It will give you feels if you've been a dog owner before. I don't have one now, but I've owned plenty of dogs. And every time there's a sad dog movie, if the movie does at least somewhat right, you start to think about your old dogs. You start to think about your Roscoes, your Grovers, your Shadows. And this movie at times, of course, makes you think that. That being said, there are parts of this movie that got a little dumb. Let's talk about the stuff that works first. I love Kevin Costner doing the whole voiceover thing. I mean, it's a bit distracting at times because it is Kevin Costner and it sounds like Kevin Costner, and it doesn't. You're not going to mistake that voice, that gravelly voice, for. It's old man Costner now, right? That voice he has now, the gravelly, deep voice. At times it gets distracting, but you get used to it after a while. The story itself and the acting, most of the acting's okay. Milo Ventimiglia, Amanda Seyfried's good. But the story, in a way, is very paint by numbers. You kind of know... There's only one thing in the movie that you don't know if they're going to go through with it. But you're pretty sure you know. You may not know 100%. I wasn't sure if they were going to pull the trigger on one plot. But then again, I kind of figured they would, and they did, and it led to exactly what I thought it was going to lead to. But they go through the problems in life, that the problems that everybody has, where you have the totally understanding wife that wants the husband to follow his dreams, even though she's getting sick at home, right? And he misses the birth of the baby, and many other things that most families would meet in the middle somewhere. Amanda Seyfried's character is way too understanding when it comes to him following his dreams, because he's traveling all the time, going to different races and everything, getting different chances and all that. And man, she's just, yeah, you need to do it. You can't quit. You can't quit. You can't quit. There's a couple times where he does say, I need to stay home, and he does, but she's due to give birth, and he's just like, I should stay. She's like, no, go. You need to go. And I had this bad feeling that she was going to hold it against him later. But thankfully she didn't, because I would have hated that. Because he would just be like, it's because it'd be one of those things where, she's saying yes, but she really means no. But so she's the most understanding wife ever, wanting him to follow his dreams of becoming this certain. He wants to be a Formula One racer in the end. So there's that. And then there's her family. Her family from the start. The dad doesn't... I mean, he likes Denny, the race car driver. But he always is... He's in a dangerous sport. And it's not good for my daughter. He's never there and all that. Which is understandable arguments, but he's almost... he's almost a little too mean about it. Where it's just like, it's one of those, it's like one of the people, when someone just keeps repeating themselves, and it's like, I get it, I get your argument. Saying the same thing doesn't help the argument. Now you're just getting annoying. It gets kind of old in a while, or after a while. But that character even gets weirder later in the movie, because Amanda Seyfried's character, and again, I'm talking spoilers here, Amanda Seyfried's character gets sick. She ends up with cancer, and you don't know if they're going to pull the trigger and have her die, but and I had a feeling they would, and she did. And that's when her daddy becomes basically a supervillain. I'm just like, he's going to try to take the kid. He's going to try to take the kid because daddy's never there. So not only does he tries to take the kid legally, but then he grabs onto Denny, and Denny kind of just shoves him away, and he flies backwards and like breaks a rib. And Denny is charged with assault, and he loses his daughter for like 90 days. And the dad is having to talk his wife into basically lying and saying that he did assault him. And he just becomes kind of cartoonishly supervillainish. And for this kind of movie, you're not really wanting that. You're wanting more. I know we're talking about a dog or a movie where you can hear a dog's inner thoughts, but you kind of want something a little more down to earth when it comes to that. So that part, it leads exactly where you think it's going to lead, and you know how it's going to end. But here's the thing, that there's a couple things that really took me out of this movie. While I thought this movie was okay, it's hard for me to recommend, because this whole time we're hearing the inner thoughts of Enzo, and just some of the stuff, the way he words things and things are fine, but they're talking about how he thinks he's more human, and he saw on TV once that that in some cultures dogs become humans when they're reincarnated. I'm like, that's how they're going to end the movie, isn't it? And that you're supposed to forget everything you were when you were a dog, but whenever you became human, they were given way too much information for it to not happen. And so, but he's like, I'm going to remember everything, so that way when I'm born, I'll be ready. But anyway, so that happens. And I'll get to that again in a second. But then also there's parts in this movie that get a bit weird and cartoonish. For some reason, Enzo doesn't like the little girl's stuffed animal, the stuffed zebra. And there's a part in the movie where the wife gets sick and she grabs the daughter and they go to her parents. And this is before we know she has cancer, but she's out there. And they leave the dog home. And they just didn't think about the dog. She was trying to get to her parents because she wasn't feeling good. And they leave the dog home for like 2-3 days. And I mean, he's just going all over the house and he's finding all the food he can. But he goes up to the girl's room, and that's when he says I started hallucinating, and we see where, of course, we know the dog tore up all the stuffed animals because he was kind of going crazy from not eating for a couple days. But he imagines the zebra tearing apart the stuffed animals. I mean, it literally gets up and starts tearing apart stuffed animals that we see, and that just took me out of the movie. So that was weird. But getting back to the end, it takes you away from that grounding that I mentioned before that we're looking for, because you're wanting more kind of a grounded story, and that takes you out of it. But the last thing definitely takes you out of it, because you know there's going to be some kind of reincarnation thing. Well, Denny finally gets his dream job now that he's got his daughter back. He's made peace with his late wife's parents. The dog has passed away, and by the way, the trailer shows you like one of the last times we see the dog, the part where they're racing in the red race car that I showed the picture of earlier. Yeah, that's like his last, let's do something special for Enzo, because he'd never ridden in the race car, and of course the whole thing, go faster, the dog wants speed, that's like his last big thing. And it is kind of a nice moment, though, I will say that. But he finally is working for Ferrari. He's been doing racing for him, he trains for him and all that, and this fan is brought to him by his daughter, and it's like 8 years later or something like that, 7-8 years later. And this fan has, like, they think his dad thinks he has the gift because of the way he races in go-karts. He says, you'd be surprised, I'm not kidding, he's really good. What's your name, kid? And the name's Enzo. And you kind of seen it coming a mile away, and he gives the kid his phone number, and he says, when you're ready to train, call me. And you're thinking he thinks that's his reincarnated dog, and so that part was weird too. So yeah, The Art of Racing in the Rain, it definitely just feels like another one of the you can hear the dog's inner thoughts type movies. I'd say it feels more like Marley and Me than it does A Dog's Journey, or whichever those movies are called. So it feels more like Marley and Me, mostly. Again, the movie gets a little cartoony and a little weird in some places, where Marley and Me, I remember being very grounded. I've only watched it the one time in the theaters because I don't think I could watch it again. Can I recommend The Art of Racing in the Rain? Rental, maybe. It's definitely not go see it in a theaters type movie. It is a feel-good movie in the end for the most part. But then again, at least the movie tells you the dog's going to die at the first, right? They show basically him laying on the floor is one of the first things you see in the movie, and he's lying in his own mess, and you can tell he's sick. So at least they don't try to hide that from you, like Marley and Me did, and that kicked you in the grapefruits. But yeah, it's not a terrible movie. It's definitely a little weird in places, a little misguided in places, but not a terrible movie. So if you like hear the inner thoughts of a dog genre, you might get a little more out of it than I did. And again, if you liked movies like Marley and Me, you might get something out of it. But is it a great movie? Not even close. That's going to be all for this edition of Talkin' Movies. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the Real Geno YouTube channel, like this video, and if you have anything to say about Brian Banks or The Art of Racing in the Rain, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Till next time, I'm your host, The Real Geno, Geno Reynolds. See you later.